Good day, everyone. For today's lesson, we are going to tackle about gender and ethics that will be presented by Group 7.
And for the lesson objectives, first, to identify the classic views towards gender and ethics. Second, to explain some theories about female care ethics. And the last one is to differentiate the four options regarding gender and ethics.
Along with the various issues on gender and ethics, one of the most notorious examples of mistreatment towards women is the practice of female genital mutilation. Just like the case of a 6-year-old girl named Nafisa from Africa, wherein her external sexual organs are partially or totally cut away without anesthesia. She was just lying quietly, bravely, and confused on what's going on, but she will surely remember her own experience. What Nafisa experienced is one of the social injustices and discrimination against women that have occurred throughout human history. And as we explore more on gender and ethics, we will consider these two fundamental questions. Number 1, how do men and women psychologically differ from each other? And number 2, based on those psychological differences, how do men and women morally differ? In studying gender and ethics, there are some classical views that we need to ponder. Number 1 is from Aristotle, the women and natural subservience. Regarding the question how men and women psychologically differ from each other, Aristotle argued that men are psychologically designed to command and women are to obey. The women's role as followers are very much evident in the family structure, wherein we have the hierarchical relations of the household master over the slave, the husband over the wife, and the father over the children. It shows that women do have the ability to make choices, but they lack a natural authority on whatever they have decided. It is only men who can make deliberative choices with their leadership and authority. When it comes to the question on how men and women morally differ from each other, Aristotle claimed that men's virtues are tied to their natural capacity to command, the same with women, to their natural capacity to obey. It is like the idea that women should have the virtue of courage, but their courage should be in performing tasks under the husband's leadership. Hence, we should note that Aristotle definitely created this view or philosophy based on how the societies of his time actually operated, which was patriarchal. But today, this view on natural female subservience is definitely rejected.
Number 2, Rousseau, women as objects of sexual desire. So a French philosopher named Jean-Jacques Rousseau was one of the most notorious philosophers of all time, since he wrote a treatise on the philosophy of education, which discusses the differences between men and women. Philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau maintained that women have special moral obligation to subservient and sexually alluring to their husband. In psychological difference, Rousseau believed that men are strong and aggressive, and women are weak, passive, and offer a little resistance. It is his strength that attracts her to him, and it is her allurement that attracts him to her. Next, moral differences between men and women. So women should capitalize on their weakness and use sex to get what they want from their husband. Like when she wants something specific from him, she should compel him by being sexually alluring. He thus depends on her cooperation to satisfy his sexual desire, and she in turn is willing to submit to his superior strength when she gets what she wants from him. Her weakness and passivity directs how she interacts with everyone around her. She must strive to maintain a good reputation as a faithful wife. Rousseau argues that women need to be educated differently to bring out these natural differences so that they can more effectively entice men through their beauty and charm. Morally speaking, as women became more emancipated, they will emulate the virtues of men. That is, women should have the freedom to develop the rational virtues of truthfulness, justice, and humanity, which were traditionally more associated with men.
One classic views by Wollstonecraft was the gender-neutral morality, and it focused the psychological difference. Mary Wollstonecraft believed that men and women are fundamentally the same. For example, women are thought to play with dolls, the same way that women are not born to be sexual flirts, but are thought to be that way. Regarding to psychological differences between genders, Mary argues that men and women are in fact fundamentally the same. If it doesn't appear that way, that's because of the gender rules that have been imposed. However, men and women have the same fundamental moral obligations and virtues. We have here three capacities that govern the moral status of all humans. The first one is reason, the second is exercise of virtue, and the third one is the passion of knowledge. The marital relation should be founded on friendship and respect for the woman's rational abilities. Nevertheless, these traits sticks with them, and they spend their adult lives engaging in trivial and childish activities such as wearing fashionable clothes, decorating, and etc. Women all have this in the same degree that men do, and society should give the same freedom to cultivate them as men have. In their daily routines, women will take on special moral obligations such as raising children. Most importantly, women also have no special moral obligation to be subservient and sexually alluring to their husband, as Rousseau maintained. Moreover, Wollstonecraft maintains that women should have the freedom to develop the rational virtues of a truthfulness, a justice, and humanity, which were traditionally more associated with men.
The fourth one for the classic views in gender and ethics is instinct versus social construction. Whatever moral differences there may seem to be between the genders are only the result of misguided education. In the psychological assumptions of Wollstonecraft, she made her best guess based largely on her own personal experience as a woman. The genders are essentially the same regarding psychological capacity. She did not conduct experiments using the scientific method or draw on neurological studies, and the tools were not available in her time, so her evidence was only anecdotal. Even today, our ability to scientifically investigate gender differences is only slightly better than it was in Wollstonecraft's day. At this stage in our scientific knowledge of gender differences, it may be best to avoid taking a strong stand on the nature-nurture question, because many of our contemporary views are still driven by stereotype and speculation. So there are studies, for example, published studies asserted that the changes in number of words produced between men and women in a day, and the idea that boys are better than girls in math, and lastly, the instinctive toy preferences with rhesus monkeys. So, the issue of gender differences is so sensitive that some scientific studies do not even make their way into the popular media for fear of bringing on a firestorm of debate.
Thank you, Ferl. Okay, let's move on to female care ethics. Females tend to see social and moral world as network of personal relationships, whereas men are more rule-following with morality and emphasize abstract moral duties, while the women focus on particular relationships and the need for caring within those relationships. Let's grant that there are at least some major psychological differences between genders. For example, the boy toy, girl toy psychological differences. A preference towards dolls, by contrast, suggest an interest in personal relationship and emotional interactions between play character. This then might translate into, a female tendency to see the social and moral world as a network of impersonal relationships.
There are various theories or principles on female care ethics. Let us start on the first one, the Kohlberg and Gilligan justice versus care. Harvard psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg proposed the 6 stages of moral development, which was very familiar to us since we have encountered this theory way back in one of our class courses during first year. Kohlberg believed that people progress in their moral thinking, which begin with personal gratification and a desire to avoid punishment, to the ideals of justice and universally applied abstract principles of morality. This is evident in a situation where a man decided to steal the drugs to save his wife's life. That shows how the man places morality over the law. On the other hand, American social psychologist Carol Gilligan considered Kohlberg's studies as male-oriented rational moral thinking, since it was done entirely on males or on the perspective of men. In Gilligan's theory, she argued that a woman's moral point of view is different from a man, whereas men typically emphasize rights and principles of justice, and women, on the other hand, focus on particular relationships, on care, and on the process. In terms of the moral development in women, they tend to consider the balance on caring for others and herself. For Gilligan, she believed that the ideal is for women to bring in balance to how much of herself she commits to caring for others and for herself, without being either selfishly uncaring towards others or a slave to the care of others.
And particularism. So there are 4 common themes in ethics of care: women approach versus traditional male approach. So the first approach in women is that women see their personal identities as deeply interconnected with other people, while in traditional male approach, man stresses personal autonomy, freedom, independence, and zones of privacy. Second, women focus on specific circumstances surrounding moral situation, while men tends to see moral situation in abstract, where the actions of individual people are just instances that should be judged by general moral rule. Third, women see morality within the context of close personal relationship and the development of intimate emotional connections, while men idealizes the impartial judge who makes moral assessment based on a rational decision making. And the last approach in women is that women see morality as a function of vulnerability and dependency, and men depicts on moral decision makers as rational, courageous, and fully informed human, which is far from the reality of helplessness in which we often find ourselves. So the differences between traditional and female approaches to morality may be only a matter of degree regarding the emphasis on particularism. So for ethics, it is precisely this particular relation, not the abstract universal principle, that generates our ethics. So morality particularism states that morality always involves particular relations with particular people and not lifeless abstractions. So care ethicists reject traditional universalist ethics. Instead, they argue that universalism is too abstract to justify your special obligations to family and community. Traditional moral theory can incorporate at least some of the particularist concerns of care ethics, while at the same time embracing general duties to those who fall outside of personal sphere. They acknowledge having obligations to people in other countries, but they seldom override our primary obligations to our family, friends, or local community.
The third one is care in virtues. A dominant feature of care ethics is its mistrust of general moral principles that supposedly govern every morally relevant action. Many defenders of care ethics argue that care should be seen as a component of virtue theory, and that care is a nurturing character trait that we personally internalize as we do virtues. According to an American philosopher of education, Nell Noddings, that care ethics is a quest for new virtues based on traditional women's practices, such as cooking, teaching, doing household chores. But for Aristotle, women's virtues were those of obedience, industry, silence, and service. Nell Noddings added that virtue theory focuses on character development, which is amenable to care ethics, rather than moral systems of rights and duties. But is Nodding correct that traditional rule-governed morality is a hostile environment to an ethics of care? An American philosopher, Sarah Clark Miller, argued that care is fully compatible with general moral principles. The female care value can be right at home when expressed as a duty and obligation to care. The concept of virtue is commonly seen as the disposition to do right actions or duties, that is, the practice of actualizing our duties. In this way, we can begin with a duty to care that is generated by needs that we see throughout the world. We then develop the virtue to care, which enables us to act spontaneously and habitually, in a caring way, and in essence become caring people. So, female care value can be expressed both a virtue and a duty.
So male-only option. Only the traditional so-called male view of ethics is valid, which emphasizes general abstract principles, and both men and women should adopt it. The general principles of ethics devised by philosophers over the centuries have withstood the test of time, while some defenders of female morality try to brand this tradition as male-oriented. Those principles of morality were formulated to apply universally to all people, male and female. Throughout history, traditional ethics has always included values that are very similar to the care values, such as charity, benevolence, civility, hospitality, and responsibility toward one's children and parents. Wollstonecraft was right. Morality is gender neutral, and it's just a matter of giving women access to the traditional value system. So traditional ethicists have formulated moral principles that apply universally to men and women alike. But it is also true that traditional morality has always been tied to human physiology. There are emotions, drives, and natural inclinations that spark specific behaviors. Even a rule-oriented value like justice is commonly tied to a special feelings, a sense of justice. While there are care-like values within traditional ethics, such as charity, they are often undervalued and they downplay particularization, which female care ethics emphasizes. Thus, the traditional male-only approach to ethics seems incomplete.
The second option regarding gender and ethics is that only female approach to morality is valid and that men and women should adopt it. According to this view, men have still the discipline of moral philosophy and forced it into an artificial system that worships rules and abstract principles, and also ignores the heart and particular context of morality. Ethics is female in character, and men and women alike should adopt it in its female form. Just as women have the capacity to work in male-oriented fields like engineering, men too have the capacity to assimilate a female approach to ethics. But there is a main problem with this female-only approach, in that its conception of ethics is just as incomplete as the male-only approach. If it is wrong for traditional male ethical approaches to prohibit the female voice, then it is equally wrong for female ethical approaches to prohibit the male voice. An important part of the human thought process is to make abstractions and general rules about our life experiences, because it is the foundation of all sciences, and it's the heart of our efforts to make sense of the world around us. So, in short, we should reject the female approach to ethics just as we should the male-only approach.
Thank you, Ferd. Okay, let's move on to the third options regarding gender and ethics, and it is the separate but equal option. First, men should emphasize male approach, and women, of course, the female approach. Baumeister said that while women and men are both social, men specialize in larger groups and while women in intimate relationships. However, this could have disastrous effect for women. For example, in men running large business, while the women doing domestic chores. And this kind of options regarding gender and ethics, we must reject it, because it turned out that girls played one-on-one with a series of different playmates, or they played within a larger group. The girls seemed to be prefer one-to-one relationship, while the boys preferred larger group or network.
The last option regarding gender and ethics is the mutually inclusive option. Compared to the previous options, this stresses that men and women should adopt both the male and female approaches to morality. Given the various consequences mentioned on the previous options, we need to internalize a mutually inclusive approach. And through the years, we can say that women have already internalized the traditional male approach to morality that emphasizes general rules. And the burden now lies on men to learn from the more uniquely female component of morality and internalize them. And surely with this option of adjusting men's moral expectations, it brings moral growth and makes men to be more versatile moral agents. In this lesson, we have learned how Aristotle saw female virtue as subservience, and Rousseau on the need of women to be sexually appealing to men, while Wollstonecraft argued that morality is gender neutral, drawing on human rationality which men and women both share. Furthermore, Gilligan argued that women have a special capacity to care for others, and this translates into a female value of care, which is a key component of particularization. Therefore, we can conclude that the best way to resolve tensions between the gender-related differences in ethics is for men and women to adopt both the male and female approaches to morality. And since we still don't know precisely what female value we should internalize, the book suggested the female version of Golden Rule that says, treat others as friends in need without violating principles of justice. By treating others as friends in need, we incorporate the female care value and its emphasis on particularization and do not violate the principles of justice. For the reference of our report, it is posted below. We hope that you learned a lot today. Keep learning and stay productive. God bless!